What is up, guys? Welcome back to Early Access Gamer. We're diving into 15 absolute masterpieces from the last decade that still put modern AAA releases to shame, from rain-slicked streets that feel hauntingly real to physics engines that remain the gold standard. These games haven't aged a day. Prepare to have your expectations for next-gen visuals completely shattered. Let's get into it. "11 years ago, Rocksteady delivered a version of Gotham City so ridiculously detailed it still puts modern releases to shame. Batman Arkham Knight, which arrived in June 2015, turns the Dark Knight's hunting ground into a rain-slicked, neon-drenched playground of absolute destruction. The real magic lies in how perfectly it captures the fantasy of being the ultimate predator. The combat is pure martial arts poetry, especially when you trigger the dual play mechanic. This lets you seamlessly swap between Batman and allies like Robin, Nightwing, or Catwoman to execute devastating, synchronized dual takedowns. It is easy to forget that players originally faced a legendary launch disaster on PC, with performance issues so severe that sales were temporarily suspended. Console players were locked at 30 frames per second, running at 1080p on PlayStation 4 and 900p on Xbox One. Today, modern PC hardware can finally brute force this masterpiece to run at a glorious locked 4K resolution at 60 frames per second. Next up at number 14, we are saddling up for Red Dead Redemption 2. Despite launching nearly 8 years ago in October 2018, Rockstar's Frontier epic still puts modern releases to absolute shame. What makes this world so intoxicating is how it treats you as an active participant in a living ecosystem. Take the absurdly detailed horse bonding system. Your mount isn't just a vehicle, it is a living partner with a distinct personality that gets spooked in gunfights and requires grooming to maintain performance. Rockstar famously programmed dynamic horse anatomy, like testicles shrinking in the cold, alongside realistic mud and snow accumulation that physically affects your movement. Tech-wise, the Xbox One X hit a native 4K at 30 frames per second, while the PlayStation 4 Pro checkerboarded to 1920 by 2160. PC players get the ultimate experience with uncapped frame rates and advanced volumetric lighting that pushes the demanding Rage engine to its absolute limit. Slipping into the foggy, alternate history streets of London in the Order 1886 feels like stepping directly into a dark Victorian blockbuster. Released in February 2015, Ready at Dawn made some incredibly bold, stylistic choices. To force a hyper-realistic, film-like aesthetic, they rendered the game at a native 1920 by 800 resolution. Those notorious cinematic black bars caused a stir at launch, with players complaining they choked the field of view just to look pretty. Critics also hammered the short campaign, yet more than 11 years later, the visual payoff is undeniable. While officially locked at 30 frames per second, clever community exploits have recently pushed this masterpiece to a silky smooth, locked 60 frames on PlayStation 5. The tactical gunplay is anchored by brilliant toys like the thermite rifle. This beast lets you blanket enemies in a thick cloud of metallic dust before launching a flare to ignite it, creating a devastating, delayed action wall of fire that flushes enemies right out of cover. Coming in at number 12, we have a game that turns office destruction into a literal art form. Released in August 2019, Control remains an absolute visual powerhouse. The real magic lies in the kinetic dance of its combat. You are constantly ripping chunks of concrete, office chairs, and heavy desks straight out of the brutalist walls to hurl at enemies, turning the oldest house into a chaotic, physics-driven war zone. Powered by the Northlight engine, this masterpiece was a pioneer for ray tracing. Even on modern consoles like the PlayStation 5, it looks spectacular. You can choose between a 60 frames per second performance mode, targeting 1440p upscaled to 2160p, or drop to 30 frames per second in graphics mode to enable jaw-dropping ray-traced reflections that make the sterile blood-red corridors look incredibly eerie. It is proof that stylized art direction and top-tier physics can easily outlast a generational leap. Coming in at number 11, Battlefield 1 proves that absolute atmospheric chaos never goes out of style. Released on October 21st, 2016, DICE crafted a muddy, blood-soaked masterpiece that still puts modern shooters to shame. Utilizing the Frostbite 3 engine, the game used photogrammetry to render incredibly realistic weapon textures in mud, alongside dynamic destruction that lets artillery physically crater the battlefields. At launch, maintaining 60 frames per second required aggressive dynamic resolution scaling. PlayStation 4 hovered around 900 to 1000p, while Xbox One targeted 900p, sometimes dipping to 720p during intense moments. Yet, temporal anti-aliasing and superb post-processing mask those lower resolutions with a clean cinematic softness. The real magic lies in the desperate gameplay flow. When a team starts losing, the game spawns a massive player-controlled behemoth, like a colossal airship or armored train. It is a stunning, terrifying spectacle that still feels unmatched a decade later. At number 10, we have a game that proved terror does not need modern ray tracing to look absolutely petrifying. Creative Assembly built their custom cathode engine specifically to replicate the lo-fi, tactile retrofuturism of the 1979 film. Nearly 12 years after its October 2014 release, those CRT monitor artifacts, heavy film grain, and chromatic aberration still ground you in Sevastopol Station's claustrophobic hallways with terrifying realism. But the real magic is how the visuals feed into the sheer panic of survival. The legendary director AI uses two separate digital brains. One always knows your general location, feeding hints to the active xenomorph brain so it hunts you dynamically rather than following cheap scripted paths. While original consoles targeted 1080p at 30 frames, technical analysts love pointing out the absolute wizardry of the Nintendo Switch port, which uses temporal anti-aliasing to deliver a cleaner image in motion than original hardware. It is pure unfiltered nightmare fuel. Taking the 9th spot on our list, Horizon Zero Dawn completely redefined what open world beauty could look like when it launched on February 28th, 2017. Over 9 years later, Guerrilla Games' masterpiece still holds up spectacularly without needing a coat of fresh paint. The absolute magic of this game lies in the tactical thrill of the hunt. Utilizing Aloy's focus scanner to highlight and systematically tear armor plates and heavy weapons off colossal machines is incredibly satisfying, especially when you turn those scavenged laser cannons back on their former owners. Behind the scenes, the legendary Decima engine pulls off a technical miracle. On a base PlayStation 4, it delivers a pristine 1080p experience, while the PlayStation 4 Pro pushes a gorgeous checkerboarded 4K, both locked at a rock-solid 30 frames per second. Even when the screen erupts in heavy particle effects and intense alpha processing during chaotic battles, the performance never hitches, proving that brilliant optimization beats raw hardware brute force every single day. Stepping into the 8th spot, Uncharted 4: A Thief's End proved that Naughty Dog doesn't just build games, they craft interactive digital showcases. Released on May 10th, 2016, this masterpiece is a masterclass in the devil in the details. Take the functional gunsling animation, for instance. When Nathan Drake stows a rifle, his head naturally dips as he physically slides the weapon into the sling, giving every piece of gear a tangible sense of weight. On the base PlayStation 4, the game achieved its cinematic magic at a native 1080p resolution and a locked 30 frames per second. Technical experts at Digital Foundry still praise its incredible implementation of physically based rendering, advanced anti-aliasing, and motion blur. These features combine to create a beautifully stable, fluid image that rivals modern releases. Navigating muddy Madagascar plains or swinging through lush tropical ruins feels incredibly tactile, making every chaotic shootout feel like a big-budget action movie brought to life. Landing at number 7 is a game that famously became the ultimate PC benchmark meme. Crysis 3, which arrived on February 19th, 2013, was an absolute visual monster built on CryEngine 3. Looking at it now, over 13 years later, it is staggering how gorgeous this overgrown, ruined New York City still looks. At launch, it completely melted hardware. Consoles desperately struggled. The Xbox 360 ran at a sub-HD 1152 by 720, while the PlayStation 3 chugged at 1024 by 720, with both systems frequently dipping into the 24 to 28 frames per second range instead of holding 30. But playing it today reveals the genius of its sandbox. The real magic is hunting with the Predator bow. This beauty lets you fire silent shots while maintaining your nanosuit's cloak. There is nothing quite like the thrill of picking off enemies without ever breaking stealth, transforming this breathtaking, hostile jungle into your personal hunting ground. Coming in at number 6, Yharnam's Gothic streets still look hauntingly gorgeous over 11 years after Bloodborne launched on March 24th, 2015. From Software's Victorian masterpiece trades shields for absolute aggression, forcing you into high-stakes melee combat where you transform your saw cleaver mid-combo using the brilliant trick weapon system. If you take a hit, The rally system rewards your bloodlust by letting you tear your health back through swift, immediate retaliation. It is a gloriously grotesque, atmosphere-heavy masterclass, yet this gorgeous nightmare is trapped in a technical purgatory. Running at a native 1080p and locked at 30 frames per second, the game suffers from notorious frame pacing issues that cause a constant stutter. The absolute refusal to give players a 60 frames per second patch or a modern PlayStation 5 remaster remains one of the most frustrating tragedies in gaming, leaving this visual triumph frozen in 2015. Sliding into our number 5 spot is a racing title that still puts modern simulators to shame. When Driveclub launched on October 7th, 2014, it was supposed to be the ultimate social racer. Instead, players were met with a catastrophic server launch that left the online infrastructure completely broken for weeks, tragically overshadowing what is one of the greatest visual achievements in gaming history. What makes this game an absolute masterpiece is its legendary dynamic weather. We are not just talking about wet tracks here. The rain droplets physically interact with the car's geometry, reacting in real time to your speed, aerodynamics, and wind direction as they streak across the windshield. Evolution Studios locked the game at a native 1080p and 30 frames per second to prioritize this mind-blowing lighting and material fidelity. While modders have recently unlocked 60 frames per second on PlayStation 5 hardware, the sheer atmosphere of racing through a midnight storm in this game remains completely unmatched even 12 years later. For our 4th spot, we have to talk about a game that looked so impossibly real back on November 17th, 2015, that it felt like magic. Star Wars Battlefront. DICE essentially became digital archivists, using revolutionary photogrammetry to scan actual Lucasfilm props and locations. The result was a jaw-dropping visual feast, even if players absolutely shredded the game at launch for being a shallow, bare-bones package that desperately lacked a single-player campaign. But visually, it was a triumph. DICE targeted a locked 60 frames per second on the Frostbite engine, pulling it off by running at 1600 by 900 on PlayStation 4 and 1280 by 720 on Xbox One. To really appreciate the wizardry, you could hop into diorama mode, a virtual museum letting you rotate and inspect highly detailed character and vehicle models in pristine movie prop quality. It proved that sometimes pure aesthetic perfection can make up for a repetitive gameplay loop. Coming in at number 3, Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain is an absolute masterclass in optimization. Released in September 2015, Kojima Productions utilized the proprietary Fox engine to deliver a game that still puts modern releases to shame. On PlayStation 4, it locked to 60 frames per second at 1080p, while Xbox One hit a smooth 60 at 900p. PC players can crank it to 4K with uncapped frame rates. This visual fidelity relies on advanced subsurface scattering for lifelike skin shading and stunning material rendering. But what makes the tactical stealth so addictive is the legendary adaptive artificial intelligence. If you constantly rely on headshots, guards start wearing helmets. If you attack at night, they equip night vision goggles and searchlights. You actually have to counter their counters by sending staff on combat deployment missions to sabotage their supply lines. It is brilliant, dynamic, and looks phenomenal 11 years later. In our runner-up spot, we take a leap of faith into the blinding, pristine skyline of the City of Glass. Released exactly 10 years ago in June 2016, Mirror's Edge Catalyst still looks like a vision of the far future. DICE crafted this masterpiece using their Frostbite 3 engine, pairing physically based rendering with enlightened global illumination to deliver a strikingly clean, high-contrast aesthetic that has aged flawlessly. Running at 60 frames per second, the game had to compromise on resolution back then, hitting 900p on PlayStation 4 and a muddy 720p on Xbox One. Today, the PC version is the definitive way to play, unlocking sharp textures and fluid performance. Traversal is an absolute dream, utilizing runner's vision to paint interactive routes in brilliant red, transforming rooftops into a high-speed puzzle. Gamers and critics rightfully complained about the clunky, mandatory combat interrupting that flow, but when you are sprinting, sliding, and wall running, nothing else even comes close. Topping our list at the absolute number 1 spot is a masterpiece that proves art direction will always triumph over raw pixel counts. Ghost of Tsushima. Originally released on July 17, 2020 for the PlayStation 4, Sucker Punch's samurai epic still looks entirely unmatched 6 years later. What makes it so brilliant is how it respects your eyes. Instead of cluttering your screen with ugly mini-maps and waypoint markers, you simply swipe the controller touchpad to summon the guiding wind. Watching the trees, pampas grass, and falling leaves physically bend to show you the way is one of the most immersive design choices in gaming history. On PlayStation 5, the adventure runs beautifully at a dynamic 4K resolution targeting 60 frames per second, but if you want the ultimate showcase, the May 2024 PC release of the Director's Cut features insane foliage draw distances, higher quality shadow maps, and support for ridiculous 48:9 ultra-wide setups alongside modern upscalers like DLSS 3, FSR 3, and Intel XeSS. And that is our list for 15 graphic masterpieces that aged like absolute perfection. It is truly incredible to see how these titles still hold up today. But what did we miss? We know there are countless other games that still look breathtaking, so let us know your own favorites in the comments below. If you enjoyed this trip down memory lane, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more gaming deep dives. Here are some more videos of ours you can watch. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.